Okay. Good evening, everybody. Sorry about that false start. My name's Lynn Doherty, Councillor Lynn Doherty, and I'm the leader of West Berkshire Council and chairman of the executive. Welcome to this meeting. Those observant amongst you will notice we're doing this slightly different this evening, and I'd like to explain to members of the public who may be watching that today's meeting is being held in a hybrid format. Following the expiry of the emergency coronavirus regulations that permitted remote meetings, all of the council's public meetings must now take place in person at a single specified geographical location, with a physical presence at that location. However, the current COVID-safe capacity of this council chamber means that not all members who might like to attend are able physically to do so. And therefore, at this meeting this evening, we have the 9 executive members in the council chamber. As well as myself, there is our deputy lead, I've got your things mixed up, my deputy, Councillor Graham Bridgman, and other members of the Executive Council, Steve Alderwater, Hilary Cole, Ross McKinnon, Richard Sumner, Joe Stewart and Howard Wollaston. Members of the Shadow Executive attending physically are Councillors Tony Vickers, Eric Pattenden and Adrian Abbs. Those people in the chamber are sitting socially distanced and are thus permitted to remove their masks while seated. The majority of officers attending the meeting and members of the public asking questions at today's meeting are also doing so remotely, unless they have requested to physically attend this meeting. The meeting is being live streamed via YouTube, so members of the public are able to follow the proceedings. Other members of the Shadow Executive and the leader of the Minority Green Party are in attendance remotely. These members are entitled to speak and ask questions when invited to do so by myself. And other members of council are also in attendance in the virtual waiting room and can ask questions at any time included on the agenda, on any items included on the agenda. They will do this by indicating electronically, and I will then invite them to be brought in from the virtual waiting room for their questions to be answered. Members who are not on the executive are not able to vote on any of the agenda items. The officers in attendance, either in person or remotely, include our Executive Director, Sue Halliwell, Joseph Holmes, and Ian Pearson, who is substituting for Andy Sharp. Our Chief Executive, Nick Carter, is hoping to join us, but may be delayed. Sarah Clark will be the legal advisor to the meeting. I'm assisted by Linda Pye, the clerk to the meeting, and by Stephen Chard, who will be acting as the Zoom host. I will now ask Linda Pye to give some reminders about the way we conduct council meetings via Zoom.
Thank you, Leader. Members, standard Zoom reminders are now being shown on screen. In addition to those points, if it becomes necessary for any members to telephone into the meeting, you won't be able to signal to speak. So once everyone who has raised a Zoom hand has spoken, the leader will be asked to invite anyone who has telephoned in to speak in order. Any voting necessary will take place by a physical show of hands. If we need to adjourn the meeting at any point, the leader will adjourn and will advise the executive of the revised time and date of the meeting. If it is a short adjournment, you will be able to rejoin this Zoom meeting. Otherwise, a fresh appointment will be sent out. Do members have any questions about the way in which the meeting will be conducted before we proceed?
Okay, thank you, everybody. We can move, therefore, to item 1 on our agenda, which is apologies. Just to make you all aware, Councillor Dominic Bowick will be joining us, but he may be late, so he will be joining us at some point. Do we have any other apologies, Linda?
We've had apologies from Councillor Royce Longton and David Marsh, and Executive Director Andy Sharp, and Ian Pearson is substituting.
Okay, just for the record, as far as apologies are concerned, I'm sure it's the committee members that we need to know. Item 2 on our agenda this evening is the minutes of the previous meeting, and these are all in your packs in front of you this evening. And can I ask, has everyone had an opportunity to read the minutes of Thursday, the 29th of April, and willing to accept them as a true and accurate record? Okay, I'm happy to propose these minutes from the chair. Does that find a seconder?
Does indeed, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Bridgman. I therefore declare the minutes have been approved, and I will ask that my electronic signature will be added to the approved minutes. Moving on to item 3 on our agenda this evening, declarations of interest. Linda, do we have any declarations of interest?
None received.
Councillor Vickers.
Leader, just that I am a member of the Greenham and Crookham Commons Commission, which is item 8 on the agenda.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Vickers. I see no other hands before me. This is quite an interesting one. I'm watching hands on the screen and looking around the room as well, so bear with me, everyone. Item 4 on our agenda is public questions. So first of all, I'd like to thank all the members of the public that have submitted questions for this evening's executive meeting, and welcome those of you able to be in attendance and hear the answers to your questions, and to ask a supplementary question if you have one. For those public questioners unable to join the meeting, I can confirm that you will receive a written response to your question within 5 clear working days of the meeting. Please note that in accordance with the new processes, you will not need to say, "I asked the question standing in my name." Your question will appear on the screen and will be answered by the relevant portfolio holder. You will then be given the opportunity to ask a supplementary question. But please remember that this must be to clarify the response provided and not to introduce any new business. In accordance with paragraph 5.12.9 of the Constitution, where questioners have more than one question, only their first question will be answered. If after all other first questions have been asked and answered and there is sufficient time, we will answer subsequent questions. Please note that the time limit for public questions is restricted to 30 minutes. And if your questions have not been answered in that time, you will receive a written response within 5 clear working days of the meeting. The responses given either verbally at the meeting or in writing will be published on the Council's website in due course. Now, I understand that we have a number of people in attendance today, and we have a number of people attending remotely. So members of the public that are watching, please bear with us, because we will be bringing in those that have come along. And so we'll be jumping in formats to and from. And I believe that the first question that we have is from Mr. John Goatley, and it's to Councillor Cole. So can I ask Mr. Goatley is here to join us, I believe. Is Mr. Goatley here?
Yes.
Councillors.
Hello, Mr. Goatley, and thank you for your question. We're currently exploring various financial funding models and options for the proposed housing company. The rent from the properties will enable future housing delivery. If we were to establish a housing company, the likelihood is that it will be owned by the council, and this will provide the means for us to meet the priorities set out in our housing strategy, which is to enable every resident to have access to a home that meets their needs. Do you have a supplementary question? Sorry, Mr. Goatley, I don't think his mic is on. Well, as you're probably aware, we gave our housing stock, West Berkshire housing stock, was passed to Sovereign in 1988, I believe. Now, this housing company is not going to be set up to rival Sovereign. It's going to deal with much more of a niche market. We are not anticipating replacing the valuable work and the partnership that we have with Sovereign. It is in addition to that.
Thank you. We then go back to a virtual participant, which is Mr. Simon Pike, and question D on our agenda this evening, which is to Councillor Richard Sumner.
Thank you, Leader, and thank you, Councillor Pike, for your question. As a result of the Regulation 18 consultation, the Council will not be publishing the Regulation 19 consultation as previously stated on 30th of June 2021. Work continues on the responses received, issues raised and proposed revisions. When the plan is ready for publication under Regulation 19, it will come to Council for full approval.
Do you have a supplementary, Mr. Pike?
I do. Do you want me to, will I come on video or do I just read it out?
You can just read it out, Mr. Pike.
Okay, so the regulations state that a local planning authority must make any up-to-date information which they have collected for monitoring purposes, that's in relation to the monitoring report, available as soon as possible after the information becomes available. Where can I find that information on the Council's website? And when will the full set of responses to the last Regulation 18 consultation finally be uploaded? Thank you.
At this stage, I don't have an exact date as to when the work will be completed. But as I say, there's the number of responses and the appropriately detailed responses that have been received. They are all being given due time to be worked through. And once that stage is complete, then I believe the information will all be available as you would expect it to be.
Thank you both. Can we move on then to question F on our agenda this evening? And I believe Mr. Paul Morgan is here to ask the question direct in the room to Councillor McKinnon. Good evening, Mr. Morgan.
Good evening, Councillor Doherty. Everybody? I take it from listening, you can't hear outside, but I presume I have to read.
No, you don't need to read. The question's up on the screen and Councillor McKinnon will give you the answer to the question, then you'll have the same opportunity to ask your supplementary.
Yeah, good evening, Mr. Morgan. I hope you're well.
Yes, thank you.
The costs will be apportioned to each project in line with generally accepted project and cost accounting principles, which would tend not to support the accounting treatment you suggest.
Okay. Yes, I do. So I presume by that the costs associated with the replacement ground will not be allocated to the LRAE. Is that what you're saying, Councillor McKinnon?
Yes, that would not be in accordance with generally accepted accounting principles.
In that case, my supplementary is that on the last executive meeting, I think in February, Councillor Wollaston did say that the council would not go ahead with the Monks Lane project if Sport England, the FA, does not support it as a replacement ground. So by its very nature, it has to be seen as it won't get ahead unless it's a replacement ground. Therefore, why will the council not allocate the costs with that to the LRA?
Yep, thanks for that. Well, as a chartered accountant myself, I can tell you that to do so would be in breach of every single project and cost accounting principle currently in practice in England and Wales. So that is the reason why that wouldn't happen.
Okay. Thank you.
We're then going back to our virtual waiting room to question G on our agenda this evening, which is Mr. Jack Harkness to Councillor Howard Wollaston. Councillor Wollaston.
Thank you, Mr. Harkness. The council are currently looking at sites to identify potential grass pitches in line with our playing pitch strategy. A range of criteria will be considered when identifying suitable sites. We continue to explore all options to ensure any solution meets the aims of the playing pitch strategy.
Do you have a supplementary, Mr. Harkness?
I do, because I'm puzzled. I mean, specifically Goldwell Park has been mentioned for some time now, and I have difficulty in seeing where it could be located in Goldwell Park, which is really why I asked the question. Goldwell Park only has two places that could possibly are flat enough, but one of them is covered with trees that have been planted recently, and the other one has the fairground.
Thank you for your supplementary. Councillor Wollaston.
If I could explain further, Mr. Harkness, this is, as I said, Goldwell Park is one of a vast number of sites that we're looking at. There is no certainty whatsoever it will be Goldwell Park that will be selected.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. Can we move to item H on our agenda this evening then, which needs to be Mr. Alan Pearce. Oh, Mr. Pearce, sorry, I didn't realise you were here in person. Apologies, I'm looking on the screen. Please do ask your question.
Yeah, thanks, Leader. So, hi, Mr. Pearce. The work being carried out is wholly relevant to an environmental impact assessment, which itself is an iterative process, as you'll appreciate. The process eventually results in a detailed environmental statement, which accompanies any future planning application. The work will be estate-wide, covering areas such as flooding, drainage and contamination. The current phase of work will cost just under £70,000, and further investigations may be underwritten by a development partner subsequently if they are on board. The current work is viewed as a confirmatory exercise, which is hoped will allow potential development partners to be sought, who can then be confident that there are not unmanageable mitigation works required as part of regeneration, and thereby make proposals unviable. Thanks.
More clarification here, just so I can get that in mind. So what's the exact context then that money's being spent? £70,000 is a pre-planning assessment. Don't quite understand.
I think I just about heard that supplementary. I think the microphone's not on. Well, we are at a pre-planning stage because a planning application hasn't gone in yet. Apart from that, I'm not sure I can add more to my original answer.
Okay, no supplement. Thank you.
Can we move therefore to item J, and I believe this is virtual, which is Mr. Vaughan Miller.
Yep, thanks, Leader. And good evening, Councillor Miller. All I can say is that discussions continue with Sport England, and an update will be provided following the conclusions of those discussions. Thanks.
Do you have a supplementary, Mr. Miller?
Yeah, sorry, I was still joining when Councillor McKinnon started his answer. Apologies. Can you repeat it, please?
Yeah, happy to do so. Discussions continue with Sport England, and an update will be provided following the conclusions of those discussions.
Do you have a supplementary?
Yes, and do you believe that you'll be able to commence demolition of Faraday Road for that, according to that planning application, before the new ground at Monks Lane comes online?
Yes, that is certainly the intention.
Thank you, Mr. Miller. Can we move therefore item L on our agenda this evening? Oh, sorry, I. Is that an I or an L? Sorry. Mr. Gary Norman to Councillor Howard Wollaston.
Thank you, Mr. Norman. The answer is yes. Sport England have provided guidance detailing their statutory role, including the 5 Sport England policy exceptions, which detail the circumstances in which they will permit development on a playing field. Their correspondence relayed a number of observations relating to technical design and planning matters. Sport England also summarised the respective views of the RFU and the FA. Their communication indicated that, subject to addressing the technical and planning matters, the proposals could meet planning policy exceptions E4 and E5. West Berkshire Council will be holding a further meeting with Sport England shortly to review these requirements.
Do you have a supplementary, Mr. Norman? Is Mr. Norman with us, Stephen?
He is, Leader, yes.
Sorry, yeah. Can you list the current conditions that Sport England have stated that are conditional on their approval?
They're very much technical issues relating to design of.
Well, fine. We'll go ahead. Well, can you tell us what they are then, please?
I'm sorry, you're asking for new information that's not
No,
direct.
no, I'm asking to elucidate. If you've just said that they approve of it in principle, subject to conditions, then it's quite reasonable to ask what those conditions are.
I think we're still in discussions, as already been noted this evening, and that
you are in discussions, but they have stated conditions that already at the moment. I just want an update on what they are.
discussions are ongoing. Thank you very much. That's all.
So no information. Hide behind your processes as usual.
Thank you for your question, Mr. Norman. Okay, can we move on then to item N on our agenda this evening, which is Mr. Nigel Foot, Councillor Arderwater.
Yes, thank you for your question, Mr. Foot. The Council's waste collection approach is informed by our commitment to achieving better efficiency and the ability to effectively recycle materials collected. And that is why, for a long time, we've only collected recyclable materials for which we can find suitable offtake markets, preferably within the UK. This approach has helped us to avoid a situation where collected materials are subsequently exported to other countries where environmental regulations may be of lower standard, as you point out in your question. In 2019-2020, the Council sent 96% of our collected recyclable household materials to processing plants within the UK. The small remainder consists of some waste paper that was sent to Belgium for recycling. The plant in Belgium complies with stringent regulatory standards and is regularly audited by our contractor. So in summary, we're reasonably assured that the Council is achieving its objectives for effective and environmentally beneficial recycling. Thank you.
Thank you. Do you have a supplementary, Mr. Foot?
No, I don't. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Can we move to item N then, which is Ms. Sarah Slack to Councillor Richard Sumner.
Councillor Slack, thank you for your question. The government's service level agreement template is exactly that. It's a template that organisations can adapt to their own needs. The clause you're referring to has been standard in public transport contracts for a number of years and is included and accepted in other agreements issued by the Council. It is to ensure confidentiality between the Council and its service providers, and it's entirely appropriate to be included. It also allows the Council to take opportunities to provide statements in partnership where possible and where appropriate. And it's also worth noting that the text also states at the end of the paragraph, which will not unreasonably be withheld. And I think that's an important point to make.
Thank you. Do you have a supplementary?
Oh, yes, please. Thank you for that. Irrespective of what other charities have signed up for, the clause 21.2 in your service level agreement includes, and I quote, the charity shall not make any press announcement or publicise the agreement or any part of the agreement in any way, except with prior written consent of the Council. This sounds to me like a gagging clause. Will you be amending it?
We won't be amending the clauses. There are a number of contracts and agreements that have already been signed, and the standard wording that we've used is across all of those. We won't be making an amendment.
Thank you, Councillor Sumner. Thank you, Ms. Slack.
Thank you.
Can we bring back Mr. John Goatley for question B on the agenda, please, which is to Councillor Richard Sumner. Hello again, Mr. Goatley.
Evening, Mr. Gately. Thank you for your question. So the executive and council officers in conversation are not aware of any inappropriate use of the A339 junction and Faraday Road. As this is the access to an industrial area, it's inevitable that it will be heavily used by LGVs. The junction allows access to London Road area for motorists travelling from the south of Newbury, and without having to drive the significant distance around the Robin Hood roundabout. This helps provide capacity on this busy junction. Some motorists may choose to use the junction and Faraday Road as an alternative route to the Robin Hood roundabout, And again, this is a shorter route, which we understand, meaning motorists use less fuel and it takes less traffic. It puts less traffic onto that busy Robin Hood roundabout. Overall, I'm of the view that this new junction has had a significantly positive environmental and network management impact.
Do you have supplementary, Mr. Goatley?
Oh, yes. As a resident near there, there has been a marked increase of companies like Downton using it as a rat run. You are proposing to turn this into a residential area, possibly in my lifetime, but I don't know. Surely you want a weight limit on there. It's set for delivery, so a 7.5 ton weight limit would stop the lorry drivers parking there. They don't have toilets overnight. They're parking in the Faraday Road, and it's causing quite an I think it's causing quite an environmental problem that wasn't thought about. But irrespective, when it becomes a residential area, do you really want Arctics thundering through housing?
I think really the answer to that can only be defined once we've moved into a planning stage for that area, and I don't think there's any guarantees or definites up until we've moved into that stage. What I can say is that the Robin Hood roundabout itself is due to undergo some extensive work as well, and in combination, that may provide the answer to the residents of Newbury.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Goatley. Can I ask then that we go to item E on this evening's agenda, which is back to Mr. Simon Pike, who is virtual, to Councillor Sumner.
Thank you, Leader, and thank you, Councillor Pike, for your question. No, it's part of the Regulation 19 consultation process and will be subject to independent examination before any boundaries are finalised. It's important to note that all parish and town councils have been involved in the settlement boundary review.
Do you have a supplementary, Mr. Pike?
Yes, I do. Thank you. So it's unclear what status the consultation was because the maps were sent out without any context about where the final information would exist within the local plan and the DPDs. And as you've said, it was only sent to individual parish councils relating to their own boundaries, and there has been no public consultation. Do you consider that that is consistent with your statement of community involvement?
I think the involvement so far, and bearing in mind this process is ongoing, has been adequate. We're not finished, and I would expect there to be further opportunity for comment as the process carries on.
Thank you. That's inconsistent with your statement that it wouldn't be consulted until Regulation 19, which is addressed to the inspector.
Thank you, Mr. Pike, for your question. Can we move on to item I on our agenda this evening, and Mr. Alan Pearce? Mr. Pearce, I believe this is back to Councillor McKinnon.
Yeah, thanks, Leader, and hi again, Mr. Pearce. Current proposals aren't increasing any areas of hard standing, so will not increase the volume or discharge of surface water entering the existing underground sewers. The existing facilities, including the clubhouse, satisfactorily drain into existing services, and where runoff from the building, which is a pitched roof, presents a larger rainwater surface catchment area than if the building was levelled to a hard surface. So existing services are well able to cope with the proposal.
Do you have a supplementary?
Thank you for the answer. Are you aware that the council's 25 acres isn't attenuated? There's no attenuation storage on the local road industrial estate. And as a landowner downstream, I'll be looking for the council to attenuate all their 27 acres back to a greenfield rate before any development takes place on the local road.
Thanks, Mr. Pearce. In regard to the wider land area to which you refer, I'm more than happy to rely on the council's highly qualified environmental officers who provide us with advice on an ad hoc basis. I don't think that was specifically related to the clubhouse, but I can only presume that you're happy with the answer.
Thank you, Mr. Pearce. Thank you. And finally this evening, can we have item K on our agenda, which is Mr. Miller to Councillor Hardwater.
Hello again, Councillor Miller, and thank you for your question. As you're aware, we started the trial of collection of plastic pots, tubs and trays this March 2021, and the early results have been very encouraging. Residents appear to be engaging with the trial in a positive manner, and our contractor indicates that the target materials continue to find a market within the UK. We're currently working with our contractor to collate more data on tonnages and contamination levels. One of the improvements we're looking to introduce shortly is to put more pictorial stickers on the front of the bins to further guide residents about what can and cannot go into the PTT, pots, tubs and trays containers. And this is based on initial feedback obtained from some trial participants. We're planning to undertake a detailed review of the trial later this summer, and that will help us to determine whether the right conditions exist for the service to be expanded into other parts of the district.
Do you have a supplementary question, Mr. Miller?
Yes, so thank you, Stephen. It is a welcome new facility, and I was going to ask when you're planning to expand it to other locations more convenient to the public, and I'd agree that this adding further signage would help as someone who uses it and is easily confused. So the facility is welcome, and it sounds like after the next review you're going to plan to expand it to other places like supermarkets. Yeah.
We'll find the right places. I wouldn't, it's premature to speculate now on where and how many of those will be, particularly well, I'm very conscious that we do need more site, at least one more site in the east of the district, which currently has rather poor provision.
Thank you.
Thank you both. And members of the public, thank you for sticking with us through that. It's a new experience for me going from virtual to live, but we will get better as we go on. So thank you everybody for joining us this evening. Can we move on therefore to item 5 on our agendas, which is petitions. Are there any petitions to be handed into the executive? I don't see any hands going up. In which case we can move on to item 6 of the agenda this evening. Item 6 is our COVID-19 Recovery and Renewal Strategy 2021 update. I intend to propose this report. Does that find a seconder?
Yes, happy to second, Leader.
Thank you, Councillor McKinnon. Last summer, I presented to you all our initial recovery plan for West Berkshire following the impact of COVID on our district. Since then, we've been taking action that delivers against that strategy, such as our new communication engagement strategy, the launching of our Surviving to Thriving Mental Health Fund, and the distribution of some 2,000 laptops to assist with home learning. However, we have also had to turn our focus and attention back to response as the second wave of COVID hit the country. And we once more directed our efforts and resources to supporting our communities through a second lockdown. During this time, we have continued to assess and gather information about those areas that we believe are going to need additional support to mitigate against the damage COVID has done to our society. However, the long-term impact is still not clear, and we will need to continue to monitor the situation and be prepared to respond appropriately as and when necessary. The refreshed recovery and renewal strategy before you this evening continues to focus on the 3 key priority areas that we initially identified: the health of our residents, support for our local economy, and the education of our children. The key change to the last strategy is that this refresh picks up on the fact that COVID-19 has raised a large number of inequality issues. The virus itself has affected some groups more than others. The economic impact of the virus has not affected everybody equally. Children and young people have not all been impacted in the same way. The updated recovery and renewal strategy, while for all residents, focuses more heavily on addressing some significant issues that have been disproportionately felt by different groups. You will see this come through in a change to our vision statement on page 4 of the strategy, and in the delivery plan, including a new equality and diversity strategy, a financial inclusion policy, catch-up programmes working with our schools, additional support for SEND, and support for our community and volunteer sector. The action plan itself will continue to evolve through the identification of need and the work of the Recovery Task Group. Inevitably, our time and attention will shift to meet the need, but this overarching framework ensures that we have a plan that complements our existing council strategy and ensures a continued focus on those areas that residents have told us are important to them. I would like to say, before asking for your support of the recommendations laid out in 2.1, 2.2 and 2.3, a quite specific remark about one of our key priority areas, the education of our children. While here in West Berkshire, we are able to direct some specific recovery funding to this area, it is not enough. And although I welcome the 1.4 billion education recovery plan from the DfE, with a specific focus on one-to-one tuition, I do not think it goes far enough or quickly enough. Education, and specifically the loss of education and the impact of this, needs a more holistic solution to support those who have fallen behind than is currently being offered. Both Councillor Bowick and myself have agreed that we will continue to press our own government through the channels that we have open to us to prioritise this part of our recovery work at a national level. That said, I do also have to give credit to our government for some of the excellent initiatives coming out to support young people to get into employment. This works well with our economic development strategy, which we'll be hearing about shortly, as we have identified young people as a priority group. So I really welcome enhanced apprenticeship payments to employers and their payment for T-level work placements that have recently been announced. I would draw your attention to the appendix attached to the plan that details some of the specific actions of the delivery plan. And I would just like to end by saying that while it's important we look to recovery, we must not forget. And I'm pleased to see the Council's plan to remember those that we have sadly lost in the district. The Blooming into Spring project will see approximately 250 white flowering cherry trees planted across the region as a lasting reminder of those that we have lost. I believe our own recovery plans do strike the right balance of all the elements that we need here in West Berkshire, and I would ask that you all give it your support this evening. Members of the Executive, do you have any questions or anything you would like clarification on? Councillor Stewart.
It's not a question, it's just to fully support, really. I would like to speak about a couple of items, if that's okay.
Of course.
So two subjects that are close to my heart at the moment, I guess you could say. So supporting adult social care. Adult social care in particular has been adversely affected by the pandemic in many ways, and most notably the residential care sector. There is still a lot more to do to ensure that those dependent on the adult social care system get the support they need and feel comfortable and reassured. But also there are a number of concerns regarding the state of the residential care market as a whole, both now and into the future. We also don't know yet what the effects of long COVID might be, and that needs to be taken into account. And then as mental health champion, promoting good mental health and well-being is absolutely key and a key part of this strategy as well. This is not just a COVID issue, of course. Mental health issues and access to services were there before the pandemic, but now they have been inflated and there is clear evidence of increased referrals for adults and children and young people. The negative impacts of lockdown have been widely commented on, including the impact created by unemployment and in some cases by having to manage grief too. But funding for programmes to support mental health and emotional wellbeing have already been put in place, but it's widely recognised that longer term support will be needed. And I make no apology for also plugging Surviving to Thriving funding, which is, in my opinion, a really great initiative that we're working on with Greenham Trust. And for anybody listening, I would really ask you to reach out to any local groups, anybody with ideas about how they can perhaps be allocated some funding to improve mental health in our area, then please do.
Thank you, Councillor Stewart. And I think what you say echoes why we need to recognise this as a continual evolving. So we've refreshed it this year. I'm sure we will refresh it in due course as well. And we need to keep a watching eye as the implications become more apparent as we move forward. So thank you. Members, any other questions? I've got a number of hands have gone up. So Councillor Macra, I've got you next.
Couple of things, several places in the report and in the appendix, it talks about increased use of digital technology. But we must please remember there's still a large number of people in this community and elsewhere who either don't have the skills or the confidence to use digital technology. So we must continue to make sure that they do have adequate access to services using the more conventional routes. The other thing is in several places is talk about the challenges facing our shops and our high streets. And it mentions Newbury, Thatcham and Hungerford. Please remember there are other towns and villages with shops, such as my own ward of Thiel, also Pangbourne, Mortimer, and so on. So please do not exclude those areas from the help that you wish to give the retail sector.
Thank you, Councillor Macro, and I agree with your comments around digital technology. I think many of us moved ahead in ways we never imagined at the start of this crisis. However, we do need to recognise that there are those that don't have access to all digital resources and make sure that we still make ourselves fully accessible. And I know that's something that's quite key. In fact, I was looking the other day around the access to super fast broadband and how we actually make that affordable to all areas. I know I'm looking at Councillor Stewart was really delighted that we got the additional funding to make sure we put technology into schools in that way this year. So we're very conscious of that and very conscious of trying to make sure that everybody is taken along on that journey with us. With regards to the challenges to shops, I'm sure you'll be very pleased to hear that West Berkshire Council's made an £140,000 available as a welcome back fund for small businesses. And that's specifically for those types of small businesses that you're talking about to encourage their normal clientele and new clientele back into their businesses. So we are very conscious that there isn't just Hungerford, Newbury and Thatcham. There are lots of areas that are going to need our support. So we made very clear that the criteria around that Welcome Back Fund didn't just apply to those major high streets. So appreciate that point fully as well and recognise that Thiel will also need our support. So thank you for your questions. Councillor Vickers.
Thank you, Leader. Yes, my question is prompted by all of us members having received the Winter Service Plan and by page 6 of the COVID recovery report talking about promoting active lifestyles. And I was wondering whether we could review the Winter Service Plan to give a bit more priority to footways and cycleways, which in the past we've been told don't have a priority. But if we're to maintain the excellent increase in people using those active methods, which of course help keep them healthy as long as they don't fall over in the ice. So I would hope that there's some funding from the COVID recovery funds, which we've got sort of been able to stash away because we didn't spend all of it in the coming winter. I know we're looking at the highway improvement standards for footways, and that's welcome, but of course that won't be going through the system until probably after this winter. So that's my comment. Thank you.
Thank you. I probably should have highlighted, Councillor Vickers, there's £500,000 that's been set aside specifically for recovery projects, and that's actually been divided against those priorities. So that service will have the opportunity to bid to the recovery fund. I'm sure Councillor Sumner is listening in as we speak, and actually you raise a valid point. I know it only hit the inboxes today, so I haven't actually had a chance to click on that particular email, but I am sure that that's something that Councillor Sumner can take away and work with the team on around submission, because the way the process is working is the services are submitting bids to the recovery panel for that money. So if that's something that we feel is important, and we certainly have as a priority building back greener and enhancing and working on those ways that we have seen over the recent months and making sure that they continue. So I'm sure Councillor Sumner is taking a note to make sure that that is looked at and a potential bid to the recovery work. So thank you for that.
Thank you. I can see he is making a note.
Councillor Brooks.
Hello and good evening. We talk about in this document new ways of working, and we've had to get used to new ways of working very quickly during the last year and the pandemic. But what I'm looking for is assurances that these don't simply become the way we work in the future without a proper consideration of how we deliver that service and a consultation as well. Let me give you an example. This time of year, people are doing their gardens and want access to HWRC, and we have 2 of them. We have a booking system. I get anecdotal evidence that it's worked well and people like it, but that is only anecdotal. That's not good quantitative data or qualitative. So to just sort of enshrine that because the users who use it are happy would not be suitable. So that I think I'm looking for an assurance that any of these changes in working practices are then tested amongst communities to say that was a better way of doing things. And if I mention HWRC, at this time of year, only 1 booking per week, but lots and lots of slots available. So we're keeping the method going, but we're not adapting it dynamically to make it better. So that was my first point, Leader. And my second one was you introduced this by saying, we are still learning. We are still, we're not through properly. We're not into the recovery proper. And therefore, I would ask you to bring this back, say September, to say, now, what is this plan look like, strategy, call it what you will, against what we're seeing now, both in West Berkshire and up and down the country. So the dynamic nature of it is tested here 2 or 3 times during the year. If it is a living dynamic document, how is it changing with those dynamics, please?
Thank you, Councillor Brooks. First of all, with regards to the new ways of working, I think there's 2 different things we're talking about there, because obviously there's a piece of work that we've done around the whole council over the years at looking at new ways of working and transformation. And that's certainly something that we will be looking at and making sure we consult with and take everybody forward with. In fact, you'll be aware that Councillor Cole has taken on that as part of her portfolio. So there's that side of it. And then there's those changes that we have been forced, if you like, to make because of COVID that you potentially would like to see remain, or you need to review to see if you want them to remain. And certainly as far as the booking system, I, like you, anecdotally have heard that it works very well, but I agree that we need to actually look and see and understand if that is the response across the district. So I have no issue with going out and making sure that that is a workable solution going forward, because we brought it in specifically around social distancing measures and enabling our staff and our residents to feel safe up there. I think it will very much, again, depend on the roadmap, and when we look at what social distancing measures are necessary, you can see how we're having to operate this evening. So no problem at all that when we get to the point where we potentially would feel that there didn't need to be a booking system, that we review with our residents whether they would like that booking system to remain or not.
That was an example, by the way, yeah.
And I'm sure there will be others. So, you know, this was very much part of the communication and engagement strategy that we brought in the autumn to make sure that we're actually listening to our communities and understanding what they need and reflecting that in the work we do. So, yes, happy to take that one forward. As far as recovery, it's a fine balance, isn't it? We brought this back first to you last July, and we don't want to spend the entire time planning. We want to actually spend time delivering. And I think what's important for me is that there is a task group that's meeting on a fortnightly basis, reviewing information as and when it comes out, and that task group is enabled to respond effectively. So that's why very much within the delivery plan, there are clear actions that we need to take now, but it is not set in stone. And I know you and I don't always agree on this, that we have an overarching plan, we have a strategy, and that delivery plan will change as and when we get more information out. So certainly don't have a problem bringing it back again. I don't know if September gives it long enough to do what it needs to do, or if we'll have enough information by then. But certainly my aim will be that we will keep reviewing this plan going forward.
Thank you for that.
Councillor Pattenden.
Thank you, Leader. I've got a couple of comments as well. I'd like to congratulate you and Councillor Bowick for recognising the total inadequacy of Gavin Williamson's catch-up programme that he was
Didn't
proposing.
say total inadequacy. I said,
Well,
I don't think it goes far enough.
I'm regarding it as totally inadequate, especially bearing in mind that in the US, £1,800 is being provided per pupil. In Sweden, 2,500. In the UK, 50. That sounds pretty inadequate, doesn't it? So the question is, how much funding do you think should be available per pupil?
I think it's a really difficult question to answer because, as I said earlier, it needs to look at a holistic package. So I don't think it's necessarily just per pupil funding. I think you need to look at things like the early years sector, what's been missed out in those areas. If you look at the across the country, it's not equal as well. And I think our strategy very much recognises that COVID has had an unequal impact on some. So you and I know Councillor Bowick have talked about our disadvantaged cohort here in West Berkshire, and I fear that that gap will have opened up. So I think there needs to be a very targeted approach, which will vary from place to place. So what we need here in West Berkshire may well look different to other areas. So I can't give you a figure. What I can say is I think I want to make sure that we're listening to our schools because I believe that they have the information that we need. We're doing that. So we've already committed some recovery funding to special educational needs and disabilities because we know that's one cohort that's been particularly adversely impacted. So as a council, we've got so much money, but it won't go far enough. It has to come from a national level. And I think when you talk about countries and their funding pots, you have to recognise that some of the funding that has already gone into the system as well. And you're just talking about the current 1.4 billion, whereas there has been other funding gone in throughout. So I can't give you a specific figure, but what I can say is we have to listen to our schools, we have to listen to our parents, and we have to understand, and I don't think we yet understand, the impact on our children. And I think that is one of those things that will only come out over time. I know when I was looking at the KPIs that we're going to look at in a moment, we haven't got the data for the last year's results because children didn't sit exams in the same way they normally do. So I think for me, it's really about making sure that Councillor Bowick, who's just joined us, welcome Councillor Bowick, and I are looking at that as a holistic approach with our schools to understand what that would look like.
I mean, this is on top of the pupil premium cuts that are going to take place as well. So, I mean, I think we can certainly agree that 50 versus 2,500.
I think we don't agree that there's pupil premium cuts. I understand there's a difference, and there's a difference in funding timing.
Well, schools
but I don't think we
are going to get a cut. In fact, schools in West Berkshire are going to get a cut of £200,000. That's a big cut.
I'll let Councillor Bowick come back in on that. I haven't been at Schools Forum for a while, but I'll let Councillor Bowick come back in on that in a moment.
My second point was to do with, you mentioned support for young people. And I just noticed that in the delivery plan, the points covering support for NEETs and the increasing demand that there is likely to be to support NEETs are only labelled as being considered. And that sounds like, well, what will happen to that support if you decide not to action those points?
Actually, NEETs is a really positive. So anybody that's watching and doesn't understand that term, this is for not in education or training at this point. So NEETs is a really interesting one because we noted a trend earlier on in our recovery work. So this recovery strategy has been running for a year, and we actually took on extra resource to specifically support our NEETs into employment. And actually, that work has had real payoff and dividend because we're amongst the lowest in the country for our NEET numbers. And that's why what I was saying earlier is we're really going to have to look at those target areas and make sure that the support continues where, as and when it needs it. And NEETs was one example where the money has already been put in place through the recovery plans to support those particular young people, and that we have a really good track record of NEETs here in West Berkshire.
The actions just say being considered, so it looks like they may not be carried forward.
I understand what you're saying. So the action is we need to keep an eye on that as well, because obviously we can't be complacent, and we understand that those young people may be particularly impacted, which is why I also said I'm really pleased with the apprenticeship money, the £3,000 per apprenticeship placement, the T-level placement. I think there's some really exciting stuff out there, and we've done Kickstart here within our own local authority. So there's some really good opportunities. So we will keep a watching brief on it. Thank you. Councillor Culver.
Thank you, Leader. Can you hear me okay?
We can.
Yeah, fabulous. Thank you very much. I thank you for your comments, and I welcome your commitment to lobby the government regarding the provision for young people. There's been coverage about the fact that the national teaching programme has not worked particularly well, and lots of money has gone to consultants rather than actually to paying teachers to teach. And there was an example where people in Sri Lanka were being paid less than the minimum wage to teach maths to young people. So if we can encourage the Department for Education to ensure that as much money as possible goes to the school and to the teacher rather than to consultants, I think that would be a very positive thing. I'm also aware that in a number of situations, young people are not actually attending the lessons. So there may be 3 pupils invited to a lesson with a teacher and perhaps only 1 is attending. So that's probably not something that the council has any kind of influence over, but just for you to be aware, Leader, that's the feedback that I've been getting from school teachers. And then the other point that I wanted to make about the engagement enablement framework, I just want to pay tribute to the local volunteers who supported the residents in my area, in my ward during COVID. We had lots and lots of people very, very committed, very knowledgeable. We had a weekly meeting to share information. If there is any way we can ensure that those volunteers are included in these ongoing conversations, I think that would be really positive. It's not necessarily just the hub volunteers or the parish councils, it's also people beyond that. And if there's any way of sort of capturing their lessons learned, I think that would be really, really positive. And I just want to pay tribute to them and to the hub and to all of the council officers that have helped us through the pandemic. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Culver. I'll pick up on your last point first, because I entirely agree. I mean, I've said this a number of times, the community response has been outstanding here in West Berkshire, and I would echo your tributes. You'll be pleased to hear that our Head of Public Health, Matt Pearson, is very much still working with the whole communication engagement piece around that volunteer piece and how we make sure that that is captured and built upon. So there is a survey launched this week directly to town and parish councils, but there is also going to be a similar survey launched asking all of those volunteer groups for their input and views and feelings. So that consultation piece is a piece of work that's currently live. So just reassurance there that we certainly want to build on that and make sure that we are listening to those groups and listening to them and understanding actually that your residents perhaps over in East Ilsley may have had different experience and different needs to my residents here in Newbury. So, you know, we're really keen to do that. So I can give you absolute assurance on that. With regards to the tuition programme, I haven't heard a lot of feedback on it, but I know that we've got Ian Pearson on the call today, who's our Head of Education. So I will certainly be asking him and Councillor Bowick to have a look at how that one-to-one tuition is the feedback from the schools themselves, so that we can hear directly from them. So we will keep a watching eye on that. And as I've said, Councillor Bowick and I are more than happy to be a voice on that within government as far as we can. So thank you for your comments. Councillor Abbs.
Thank you, Leader. Yeah, I just wanted to come back on the booking, the example that we came just for a moment. I consider myself a digitally rich and enabled person, not because of what the government's done or what the council has done, but because I figured out to do it myself. So there's some work we can do there to bring in the last few thousand people, because I keep seeing announcements about, yeah, we've completed the broadband rollout and it's all great. There's thousands of us, thousands of households that still don't have decent broadband. But that's if you know what you're doing. If you start to look at people who don't know what they're doing, and we took this booking system, for instance, maybe it's because I'm a shadow portfolio holder in this area, but I see both complaints and praise. So it depends. If you talk to people through a digital channel, they tend to praise it. If you talk to people in any other channel, they don't tend to like it. And that shows the increasing digital divide between the digital rich and the digital poor. So I really want us to focus on this area when we go through those recovery bits. But also, I think we really must take it into account that even if the digitally rich and enabled, and we decide as a council it's a good idea, we must explore whether the quantity of the recycling has remained the same. So in other words, have we brought a system in that's somehow degrading the amount of recycling that's going on? I don't have the answers to throw in front of you, but these are things I think we definitely need to measure. We do have one example, of course, the green bin tax, which we know it resulted in a small decline in the overall recycling rate in that area. So we do need to be very careful. Yes, Councillor McKinnon, it did drop. I asked several questions on this over the last couple of years. So in the round, you know, digital's a good thing. It can save us a bunch of money, all of this time, but only for those that know what they're doing.
Okay.
And are able to actually enable it themselves.
I'm going to work backwards again because that's what's freshest in my mind. I think as far as the recycling is concerned, I think if you've read the report that's coming in around our quarterly performance measures, the percentage of household waste that's being recycled has held within West Berkshire. I'm looking at, I'm sure that's in the report.
I'm talking about the whole quantity, not
right,
a particular element.
So certainly from the KPIs that I see, the household waste recycling has held. As regards to the digital side, I agree, which is why throughout this we've kept an online phone call system. So we've got customer support here. If you cannot book online, you can ring that customer support number, and we've made sure we've kept that throughout, recognising not everybody is digitally enabled. And I appreciate all the comments you say that not everyone is digitally enabled. So we need to be able to offer those alternatives, and throughout this system you are able to telephone the council and book those through that system.
If I might say, Leader, we must keep, we know that the whole vehicle recognition system's coming along as well. That's further digital enablement. We just got to keep an eye on this, and as long as we have the backup systems, as long as we can still address the digitally poor, we'll be okay.
Fully appreciate those points. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, members, I think I'm going to Councillor McKinnon. He was going to second this report. Thank you, Councillor McKinnon.
Yeah, thanks very much, Leader. And yeah, I mean, the themes in this recovery and renewal strategy, supporting the economy, helping residents, education of our children, addressing the inequalities caused by COVID. You know, these are all themes which are close to my heart and will actually heavily feature in my own economic development strategy, which we're going to be hearing about very shortly. So yeah, really delighted to second this. I think we've heard some good constructive comments from opposition members tonight, in amongst a couple of rather pointed criticisms of central government, which of course is their choice. But this strategy is what this council is going to do. And I think it's an excellent document, and I'm delighted to second it. And just one final thing, if I may, Leader, I'd like to pay tribute really to the hard work of all our council officers and staff throughout this COVID pandemic. You know, I think all of us as members have seen at first hand our council staff go the extra mile since this horrible pandemic first presented itself. I know we're all incredibly appreciative of the effort and the hard work that's been undertaken. So I'll conclude my remarks with that, Leader, and delighted to second.
Thank you, Councillor McKinnon, and you will have no argument from me from seconding your remarks around our councillor officers. We have mentioned that previously, but we can never stop mentioning it. Thank you. So we have I've proposed, and Councillor McKinnon second, we have recommendations that are laid out in 2.1, 2.2 and 2.3. Can I ask executive members to vote by raising their actual hand in favour of the proposal to approve the recommendations?
Thank you, Leader. That's been approved.
Thank you, Sarah. In which case, can we move to item 7, which is the refresh of the Economic Development Strategy and Delivery Plan? And I believe, Councillor McKinnon, you're going to introduce this report. Does that find a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Sumner. Over to you, Councillor McKinnon.
Thank you very much, Leader. Yes, delighted to propose my refreshed economic development strategy. This strategy was adopted by the executive first back in April 2020, which seems like an awful long time ago. The themes of the strategy, the headline themes, haven't changed since then, and they do dovetail and interlink with several other of the council strategies. We just finished hearing about the excellent recovery and renewal strategy. This economic development strategy also has close links with environment and leisure, and I'm probably missing some out as well. But the 4 themes: people, places, infrastructure, and business environment. So people involves skills and training. You know, we just heard from a couple of the opposition members about how important that is, and of course that is correct. In particular, I'm delighted to see clear support or clear intention to support the unemployed get back to work. And we've already been doing that here in this council with our really great response to the Kickstart programme. I think we've already got 8 people involved who previously were out of work for a very long time, young people. So delighted with that. And also our further support for apprenticeships is detailed in our strategy here. On places, we intend to reshape our town centres, not just Newbury, but across the district. We emphasise sustainable development and our enhanced leisure offerings, which we're going to be bringing forward very shortly in due course. On infrastructure, we're passionate about green infrastructure and carbon reduction, of course, as well as dealing with full fibre rollout and intelligent transport infrastructure. And finally, on business environment, we want to encourage startup businesses. We want to encourage and develop strong relationships with local businesses. The leader mentioned earlier tonight about our Welcome Back business grants. Just yesterday, we had a well-received webinar with about 50 local businesses. It was a really excellent take-up about our West Berkshire Council funded Welcome Back business grants. There's a decision the council took to make 140,000 of funding available for that purpose. And I was delighted. The economy manager and economic development officer did the hard work, of course, but I introduced it and chaired the webinar. And the response really from the businesses was very heartening. In terms of the refreshed elements, the priorities and actions in the strategy have been updated where appropriate to incorporate our response to COVID. The high-level delivery plan that helpfully splits the deliverables into short, medium and longer term. The detailed delivery plan to sit alongside this strategy is still to follow. And I'll conclude my initial remarks by saying that on page 40 of the pack, we have a statistic there that the UK economy in 2020 contracted by 10.2%. It was actually revised downwards. It was less than that. It was 9.8. And in terms of economic prospects, the UK is expected to grow by nearly 7% in 2021. Which is a significantly faster rate than the rest of the EU, which provides an encouraging overall national economic environment for this strategy. Thanks, Leader.
Thank you, Councillor McKinnon. Do we have any executive members with any questions for Councillor McKinnon? I can see I've got hands gone up from Councillor Dillon.
Yeah, thank you, Leader. Thanks for the commentary there, Councillor McKinnon. I wanted to just talk on two areas. So we've seen an increase in unemployment of West Berkshire in the last year of over 2,500 people, and that focus on reskilling, is crucial there. And within the document, we look, and quite rightly, we look at younger people, and I know it outlines activities that could be undertaken from those trying to return into work, but as a key part of getting them back into employment, allows them to carry on paying their mortgage, or paying their rent, and gives them that stability within their home, which then gives them that stability within their community. And then the other one, it was just a bit of a in your conclusion to your strategy, Councillor McKinnon, you talk about the initial crisis response around grant giving, and that we're now moving into a different phase of recovery. But I do think actually that the situation still is quite acute out there for certain sections of our community where crisis grants are still needed. So rather than it becoming sort of BAU, I think there are still sectors, the taxi industry, for example, that could benefit more from our COVID grants that we have available to us. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Dillon, and thanks for those comments. Yes, I wouldn't take issue at all really with what you said about unemployment being an issue, not just for young people, but for everyone across the district. I wouldn't disagree really with that. And yes, I mean, we still very much are in the phase of giving, of distributing grants to businesses and to sectors who need it. You mentioned taxi companies. We've already distributed over £24,000 to taxi firms, and often these firms are one-man band and very small firms. And I think Councillor Abs has a question on that later as well. So yes, we absolutely are still in that phase, and that's expected to continue for a little while. So no, not too much disagreement on that.
Thank you, Councillor Dillon. Councillor Brooks.
Thank you, and thank you, Councillor McKinnon, for marking what you think the quality of our interventions are. We don't actually use you as a benchmark on whether we make good contributions or not, but thank you for marking them. You'll know what I'm going to say. This is all about the what, but it is also hard to measure when you will consider yourself to have been, or the council will be able to say they have been successful. So when you talk about helping small businesses, people coming in, micro businesses, self-startups, how many have we got now, and how many do we hope there might be, in order to be able to say that this is a measurable plan, strategy, and we know we have had an impact? Because as I've said many times, it is motherhood and apple pie to say we will help people start up businesses. But if you help one in the next 3 or 4 years, have you really made a difference? What would make a difference? And when I read these, and I read statements that are really just, need a bit of oomph to them. On 4, support Newbury College's University Centre. We will explore the possibility of arranging placements for their students within West Berkshire. How more insipid could you be on a statement like that? We will explore the possibility. We will work with intent to see how we could achieve this, is the wording I would like to see. So it's about the baseline, the measurement, the ability to go back and review, have we made a difference? You talk about in this document quarterly webinars for business, but in that you talk about, well, we'll help you with public protection and general revenue and rates. No, that webinar can help them with a startup, be signposted to where they might get digital skills, where they might get premises, where they might get kit, IT kit. And by the way, if you're going to do it quarterly, I'm hoping your first one will be in September. It should already be in the planning stage if it's going to be quarterly. So I really want to see more about the how. And the other thing we're scratching our heads about on this side is the Thatcham Master Plan being underway. That'll be news to Thatcham Town Council. It really will, that you are already underway on the Thatcham Master Plan. But if I crystallize my comments, it's about when you put a plan down, a strategy, please put stuff down, the baseline that we can measure in 4 years' time. Was it just a document that we ticked a box, or we actually made progress against those fundamental ambitions, sir? And if you don't like that intervention, I don't care.
Thanks for that, Councillor Rooks. I think you started your contribution there by saying that it wasn't going to surprise me what you're about to say, and I think that was probably true. When we introduced this strategy's first version back April 2020, I think the words you've just given, they're not unfamiliar to us here tonight. I think they sound quite familiar. And my answer to you back then, don't want to quote myself, I'll probably trip up, but it would probably have been along the lines of, look, there's a detailed delivery plan to follow. And I think a lot of what you say, I mean, I think using the term insipid to describe some pretty good objectives, I think that was uncharacteristically unkind of you, Councillor Brooks. That's not like you. But I think what I would have said was, I think what I would have said was, look, the detailed delivery plans to follow, of course, we're going to have measurable, smart, smart KPIs. So, it's the same answer I gave to you back then, and it's in the post, and watch this space. But yeah, I think I'll leave it there. Thanks, Jeff.
And the master plan, sir, the Thatcham master plan is underway. No knowledge of that in the community, sir. I would like an answer on that, even if you can't give me one this evening, please.
Well, no, I think I'll have to get back to you on that, Councillor Brooks, but the Thatcham master plan is an important piece of work that we care about very deeply.
Councillor Vickers.
Thank you, Chair. Well, my point was going to be about the Newbury master plan, but I can't resist, before I get onto that, trying to come back at you, Councillor McKinnon, with your, I think, quite unnecessary, uncalled for dig at the EU's lower rate of recovery than the UK. I think we need to remember that our recovery at point of Brexit was a lot greater than the EU's was. So we've got a lot of recovery to make up for. Okay, but that's not to do with your plan. I was going to say, Councillor, so my point, leader, was on para 5.8, where you talk about the new posts, which were very welcome, to particularly project officers, the LRIE and town centres. I'm really glad that Newbury Town Council has a seat at the table on the Newbury Town Centre Master Plan. I'm not so pleased that we don't have a seat at the table on the LRIE plan. I mean, what you said in answer to a member of the public just now, we have no knowledge of the work that you're doing there, and I do think you should do. And my general point, though, is that one of the biggest changes that's taking place in Newbury Town Centre is there are more people living there. And whilst that will help the economic recovery too, because that's local customers for the shops, local footfall, I don't think we should forget that there is a social impact on that. And just to give an example, I know we can't do anything about plans that come forward, but the Kennett Centre plan involves, as you know, a lot of demolition. And amongst the demolition will be the only 2 nightclubs in the town. Now, that will be, I've never been to a nightclub in my life, I don't think, but they're awfully popular destinations in normal times. And I do think we need your economic recovery officers to have some, bigger concern. It's the town council's job because we directly represent those town centre residents. But let's not lose the fact that we need to maintain social sustainability in town centres, whether it's Thatcham or Newbury. So if you could take that point away to just remind your newly recruited officers, we'll be welcome to meet them. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Councillor Vickers. They may even be watching on YouTube. I don't know if they're going to be glued to their computer screens tonight. I've not been to a nightclub for quite some time either. I have been to one, but it seems like longer and longer ago in the past. So yeah, I'll take those points on board about the social sustainability. I wouldn't argue with that at all. I think we can maybe discuss elsewhere about the LRIE makeup of the board. The boards did look a little bit different a while ago, and I'm not sure we want to scratch that one again in this forum, but let's talk about it offline.
Thank you both. And Councillor Pattenden.
Thank you. Yes, just a procedural comment. It's my son's parents' evening at school, and so I need to leave, but thank you very much.
Thank you for joining us, and I hope you have a very successful evening. Councillor Sumner, I believe that you wanted to second this paper.
I did, Leader. Thank you. I'm not sure that there's much I could add after the conversations that have just been held. I was going to say that following an incredibly difficult period, it's right and proper to provide this refreshed plan now. Key to note for me, as has already been said this evening, is that everybody continues to learn and develop as we move forward. And I believe our commitment is evident throughout this document. I have to say, interaction that I've had with small businesses in particular have been very positive and supportive of the actions that we've taken. And I believe they continue to look to us to continue that support. I'll leave it there, Leader. I'm happy to second this paper. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Sumner. So Councillor McKinnon has proposed, Councillor Sumner has seconded. We've got a recommendation 2.1 to consider and offer recommendations to the executive of the 2021 refresh of the economic development strategy and the accompanying high-level delivery plan. Can I ask executive members to vote by raising their actual hand if they're in favour of the proposal to approve the recommendation?
Thank you, Leader. I confirm that that has been approved.
Thank you, Sarah. Can we move on then to item 8 on our agenda this evening, which is the common land exchange proposal with Greenham and Crookham Golf Club. Councillor Sumner, I believe this is your report. Does it find a seconder?
Sorry, Leader. Sorry, Councillor Brooks is waving.
Councillor Brooks, what can I do for you?
I did wave earlier to you to declare an interest in this, as my son-in-law is the golf professional there. So taking no part in this debate.
Okay, thanks, Councillor Brooks. Over to you, Councillor McKinnon. No, over to you.
It does find a seconder.
It does find a seconder. Thank you. Lost my train of thought. Sorry. Over to you, Councillor Sumner.
Thank you, Leader. I'll be very brief on this one. This is a straightforward paper for me, and it's to note the actions taken to support the request from the golf club in transferring a piece of land status and to exchange it for an alternative and equal parcel of land. There's no risk to the council, so I'm happy to propose the support.
Thank you, Councillor Sumner. Does anybody have any questions for Councillor Sumner? Councillor Vickers.
Just like to congratulate Mr. Hendry, who's probably not on this call, but he did a lot of work there. And I've sat through, I think, 3 Greenham Common Commission meetings trying to get my head around this. I mean, as somebody who used to have cartographers under his command, this is all down to the digital era, and when people just drew lines on paper maps and then they got digitized. If you look at the bit of land that we're exchanging, that's the whole problem. But it's just a total anomaly, but it's created a lot of work, and I think it's confusing for the public because this is not, as it says in the report, it's not council-owned land. It's just very much a paper exercise, a GIS exercise. So very simple.
Councillor Vickers, and I'm sure that Councillor Sumner will pass your thanks to Paul. Councillor McKinnon, anything you want to add?
No, nothing to add to what's already been said. Happy to second.
Okay. The recommendation for this is laid out in 2.1. As it's a recommendation to note only, there is no need to vote on this item. Thank you, everybody. And we can move on to item 9 this evening, which is the performance report Q4. Councillor Wollaston, I believe this is over to you. Although I must say, before I hand over, I'm happy to second this report.
Thank you, Leader. I would like to propose that the 2021 performance report is noted. Given the situation we saw throughout 2021, I consider the performance of this council, and in particular from our officers, has been outstanding. Inevitably, COVID has had an impact on certain performance indicators, many completely outside the council's control, such as Care Quality Commission inspections in care homes. Collection of business rates and council tax have obviously been impacted for the same reason. Library and leisure centre use has inevitably seen less use. Our revenue and benefits team has done a magnificent job in getting COVID grants out to businesses, meaning that West Berkshire is well set for a rapid economic recovery. The number of rough sleepers is down to 0. Just a few of the statistics highlighted. I would like to commend this report and repeat how impressively our officers have performed in very difficult times.
Thank you, Councillor Wollaston. Members of the Executive, Joe, Councillor Stewart, would you like to say anything?
Yes, please. Thank you, Leader. As Councillor Wollaston has just mentioned, unfortunately, for the full year's report, the percentage of West Berks Council provider services inspected by the CQC and rated as good or better, we didn't manage to make the 100%, but I'm really delighted to announce today that following a recent inspection by the Care Quality Commission, Birchwood Care Home has now received a good rating, and that has actually been published in the press today. I just wanted to mention a couple of things actually, because we've been talking about how wonderful our council officers have been and our staff have been, and I particularly want to make mention of the caring staff in those care homes. When you think that they have moved the situation, the service and the quality of that service from where it requires improvement to good during a period of COVID-19 and all of the different practices that had to be put in place to accommodate that, I think it's absolutely amazing and should be noted. I just wanted to make, and anybody obviously can read that report, it is now public, but I just wanted to pick out a couple of aspects that I was really impressed with. And this is feedback that's come from the inspectors on the day and in their report. One of them, which I thought was absolutely amazing, was that, I've got to find it because I've got a number of them. The housekeeping team take a pride in their work, and it's the cleanest care home I have ever been in, which is a member of the inspection team. So that is just, that's a stunning thing for somebody to say. And I'm really pleased that, that's been singled out specifically. The inspection team also highlighted several areas of excellent practice. Outstanding end-of-life care on the nursing floor, so important. Staff knowing the residents so well that they can almost anticipate what people need or want, despite those residents having communication difficulties due to their dementia, as one example. And they also made mention of some of the things that are coming along the way. So the plans for the continued refurbishment of looking across all of the care homes, actually, but in particular, how lovely and this lovely was their word, not mine, the newly refurbed Walnut unit was looking, and the fact that it had been very well designed with a dementia-friendly environment. And that is hopefully going to be replicated across the other care homes as well. I could wax lyrical about lots more, but I think I'll probably stop there. So I just wanted to make mention. I do feel a little bit like I've stolen the glory from Councillor Bridgman. So clearly, also thanks to Councillor Bridgman as the previous portfolio holder.
Thank you, Councillor Stewart, and can I echo my thanks and congratulations to the team over there. Very apt, particularly as we are talking about care this week, and it is National Carers Week as well. So I would echo our thanks on behalf of the whole council to the team. Councillor Arderwater.
Yes, thank you, Leader. And likewise, I'd just like to highlight one encouraging statistic, which is that related to percentage of recycling at the bottom of page 86. I'm glad that after languishing around and indeed just under the 50% mark, we have cleared 51% over this last year. And again, just to note this, these numbers have a lot of validation and lag built in. So there is a lot of time that will pass before those validated. Nevertheless, and while this is a small move, I really welcome, particularly given some comments which were made earlier about the recycling service, that we are moving in the right direction. There is, of course, a very long way to go, and I do look forward to the results, as we heard earlier, of the pots, tubs and trays trial turning into success. That would be a small element, but more significantly, I'm looking forward and trusting, if things go together, that we'll be able to implement future measures in the coming years, which will build significantly on this number. But again, an encouraging number there.
Thank you, Councillor Arderwater. Councillor Dillon.
Sorry, I know Councillor Bridgman's signal.
I know. He just snuck in there. Do you mind if I take
No,
him?
of course not.
Councillor Bridgman.
Thank you, Leader. Having been mentioned in relation to the report on Birchwood, I think I will just say and Councillor Dillon will know what I'm going to say. It's going to be a great pleasure to see that KPI for provider services move from red to green. And I certainly congratulate the team there, because a lot of work has been put into that care home, and it's now borne fruit. And congratulations to them, because, as I say, it's been a long road because COVID got in the way of a re-inspection. So we've been sitting at requires improvement for an awfully long time. It's great to see that go to good.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Bridgman. Back to you, Councillor Dillon.
Yeah, thank you, Leader. We've gone through all of the exception reports, and it's quite clear where COVID has had an impact, or where you've intentionally missed a target because of COVID. So your council tax or business rates collections, and as the opposition, we can read through those exception reports and agree with the reasoning behind them. But I'd just like to pick up a couple of sort of more strategic points around them. On sorry, I'm just going to bring it up on my screen. I haven't got two screens available. On the exception report about assessments being completed, it doesn't actually tell us what the impact of missing that target is. And what I would like to, if it was 5% were missed and then we got round finally to doing that 5%, what were the outcomes from that? Did they have a delayed care package that they might have had? Were they charged more in that interim period? And then what are we as a council doing about addressing that balance? So really understanding what the impact of the KPI is. And then the other one is just about taking a more strategic sort of view around customer facing roles, and when we have a vacancy, and then the impact that has for our customer, i.e. our resident. And again, that target was only missed because we had a staff vacancy. Yet, if that's a front-facing service, why can't we decide to take a hit somewhere else, on our services rather than on that? And so just taking a more balanced approach to how we resource to make sure that the customer is the focus rather than the rest of the service. But as said, on balance, we understand why targets have been missed. Councillor Bridgman, we're clearly happy that care homes are in the right grade, but I know that Councillor McCrow has other views as well, and I think that's probably why he signalled to speak. So I'll leave it there, Leader. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Dillon. I'll go to Councillor McCrow now.
Thank you, Leader. Yes, it's great news about Birchwood, and I'd like to add my congratulations to the staff and all concerned in getting that care home up to good, and with all these wonderful things the inspectors have said. But on the other hand, there used to be 2 homes that prevented this indicator from going green, being red, should I say. One was Birchwood, and the other one was Walnut Close. Walnut Close is now closed, so that's removed from this indicator, but it was only closed because, unfortunately, such a large number of residents throughout our care homes lost their lives during the epidemic, and it's a great shame. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Macro. Councillor Vickers.
Thank you, Chairman. This term customer facing, it links with the point I want to make really on behalf of Councillor Martha Vickers, who covers the health and wellbeing area for us. And I've got another point on my own portfolio on our highways. But on the first point, which is really, really important, I mean, at last, we're seeing mention of the child protection area in page 84, I think it is, and also table 20 on page 101. I can't think of any more important customer-facing role of our officers than the health visitors and the children's services, people that go into homes, and the teachers that can see the full picture of the children in front of them. And we know it's the tip of the iceberg, what comes in front of the police as a criminal offence. But, you know, we talk about long COVID. This is going to be a very long-running problem facing society that we've missed out in the last 18 months on all sorts of problems to do with domestic abuse and child abuse that have been taking place in homes, out of sight of the professionals, many of whom we employ, but all of whom we work closely with. So it's starting to show in the influencer figures. It's not all down to us, but I think in the long run, it will be down to us as the leaders of this community. So that was one point. I just also want to point out a very different point, which is in my highways portfolio. It's a question, really. What does it mean by the fact that we're in the top 5% of, where is it now? Let me call it up on my page 80, page 86 it is. It's the one above what Councillor Arder-Water mentioned, yes. Road networks in need of repair, A roads, top 25% nationally, and this is a red. And it's all down to the inclement weather. And we know, and I have to say, it's mainly in the rural wards, but not entirely. Some of the roads, if you haven't got a four-wheel drive now, riding around our roads, it's been quite dangerous with the potholes and the crumbling away. But what does this mean? Are we in the top 25% on the naughty table, in the naughty corner, or are we the top 25% in terms of good? So that was my question. I don't know whether Councillor Sumner can answer that or whether officers can.
I'm going to look to Councillor Sumner for that particular KPI.
Thank you. If you read further on down where the table is, you'll see that it's one of the lower is better type figures. So I looked at 3% and nearly fell off my chair, but actually 3%, you know, we'd have been better if it was 2% or 1%. I mean, I accept that, yes, the reasoning that's given, and I accept that there are some of the more rural roads that need to be on the plan, are on the plan and are programmed in for work. It's a considerable amount of work that was done on the A4 already, and that was in anticipation of the road breaking up, and there's further plans for more of it from Thatcham towards Reading as we move into the summer, through the summer. But I think I struggle with this one because I spend a lot of time driving in a neighbouring authority, and when I drive on our roads, it's like driving on carpet in comparison. So yeah, I'm obviously just picking the right roads is the answer I expect back on that one. But my feeling is on this, there is planning in there. We've done exceptionally well through COVID, and Volker have been exceptionally good at getting out there and continuing work. So I think this red can be turned around.
Thank you. And I'm just going to ask if Councillor Bowick wants to come back on the point you raised for Councillor Vickers, the other Councillor Vickers.
Yes, thank you, Leader, and thank you, Councillor Vickers, Councillors Vicker, on the point about child protection plans. Yes, they had exactly as the report sets out. You're right to observe that there's been an increase in inquiries, and of course that feeds through to more serious concerns. And it is a consequence of the pandemic, of in some cases more time together, in other cases less time together. And our excellent social workers are absolutely cognizant of this. And we know that we are a good service here in West Berkshire. And in due course, the attention will be applied at the points needed to try and deal with this increase in cases. Can't say that we will be able to do anything to bring them down in the short term, and that really I regret, Leader, I wasn't here for the debate on the recovery and renewal strategy. The significant aspect of that, of course, is to look after our most disadvantaged children.
Can I just come back?
Yeah, I was just going to add to it because I didn't know if you were going to pick up on domestic abuse, because I know that's probably one of the things that Councillor other Vickers, Martha, would have raised, because I know it's an area that she's particularly interested in and I'm particularly interested in. I don't disagree that I think I said this with the recovery and renewal, we don't know the long-term impact on some of our communities, and that goes to child protection cases, but it also goes to domestic abuse, and our numbers are particularly low. But when you're talking about domestic abuse, low numbers aren't necessarily a good thing, because we know that we want people to be coming forward and reporting, and they're not. So we entirely understand that point of view, and that's why with the recovery and renewal, I think it's really important we keep this watching brief, so that as we get more information out. But what I would echo is what Councillor Bowick said, is that we know we've got the right teams in place to respond. So as we get more information out, we know we've got the right team. So with regards to domestic abuse, as you know, there's a new statutory duty on us, and I think, was that what you were going to come in on, Councillor Bridgman?
One of the two things.
He always tells me off for saying what he was about to say, so I probably shouldn't say anymore, but I think, I'm comfortable we've got the right people in place as and when we see the needs come out to be able to respond.
Can I come back? It's actually a broad, it's not just this area, but across all council services which are public facing. I'm concerned that we're still saying people can work from home when necessary. It may be not necessary to visit people, and this is planning, site visits, but sometimes it's much better if people were working from the office and doing several site visits in a day, particularly for staff who perhaps live 50 miles away, and they can do a lot of the work from home. But I think we're going to see a reduction in efficiency and overload if we're too strict about saying work from home where possible. I think there's a balance to be had as we come out of recovery on that.
Okay, I think there's two things there. There's the roadmap. So at the moment, the guidance until the 21st of June is that you should work from home if you can. However, hopefully, if that changes, I agree with you. And as you're aware, we're looking at the working patterns of staff across West Berkshire and how that looks going forward from here, because everybody has been working from home, and in the KPIs you can see that. But going forward, I completely take your point. And having spent some time in the office, I actually think there's a real benefit to spending time in the office, not just from your own mental health point of view, but from some of the ideas and innovations that you get from that. So we're trying to make sure we get that balance right going forward, and are going out to consult staff, or have been out consulting staff on that and asking for their views on work patterns going forward. Sorry, Councillor Bridgman, I hope I haven't said everything.
Not at all, Leader. And just to pick up on that particular point on domestic abuse, of course, we have very recently created, out of what already existed, it's not as if nothing was being done before, but because of this new statutory duty, there is now a domestic abuse board, which has just been created, and I'm waiting for the first meeting. The other point I was going to pick up on is that, of course, you asked Councillor Vickers about what does top 25% nationally in respect of A roads mean, and of course there is for all of these red indicators, there's an exception report. If you go to the exception report, it explains precisely what top 25% means, and the target is less than 2% of principal road network in need of repair. And that would take us into the top 25%. The return is 3%. So it's not a million miles away. That's the first thing to say. And all of the explanation is in that exception report. I leave you to read it.
Okay, members, I think we've had a good conversation around the performance measures. I'm seconding, but I feel that we've probably, oh, have you put a hand? Oh, there's a few more hands gone up. Councillor Dillon, sorry, I thought we'd been to you.
Sorry, you had. I just had one other question. So on section 5.25, it talks about the local plan. I know it came up in the public questions earlier. Obviously, this was referring to where you were up to when the report was written, and we're reviewing it nearly 3 months on. In there, it said it was on track, and I appreciate it may have been when the report came out. We've heard now that it's not going to be delivered to the original timetable. I just wondered, did you have a ballpark figure of when it's likely to come to council? So is it September's full council that we'd be looking for example, rather than a particular date?
Councillor Sumner, do you want to come back on that?
Current date we're looking at would be October.
Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Dillon. Everybody's done. Okay, I'm down to second this, but actually it's recommendations to no. I think we've had a good conversation. I just think, and I know it's been said, it's really important to recognise that all of this work has been going on while we've been responding to COVID. So, and I know, Councillor Dillon, you recognise that in your comments around the impact and intentional misses. So recognising that, I'm actually really pleased to be able to see this report come forward. I think there's some real positives in there. I know there's still work to be done, and that will be very much built into our council strategy refresh and the recovery and renewal refresh that we've seen this evening. So more than happy to second, but the report is purely to note, so there is no need to actually vote on this item. Can we move on then to item 10, which is Councillor McKinnon is going to talk to you about the revenue financial performance provisional outturn. Before he does so, does that find a seconder? Councillor Stewart, thank you for seconding the report, and I will hand over to Councillor McKinnon.
Thank you very much, Leader. Yes, so happy to propose the recommendations in section 2 of this report. The headline figures, so this is the outturn for the entire year, 2020 to 21, is that the council underspent its budget by £4.6 million. That's, I was going to say principally, but 2 million of that underspend came from the adult social care service, a further 1.2 million from children and family services. Other services underspent as well, but those are the most significant parts. Without wanting to steal opposition members' thunder, I'll just say for the moment that in a COVID-affected year, this budget was set on the 3rd of March 2020. I remember it very well. It was the first budget that I delivered to the council, and it was just a couple of weeks really before the lockdown took hold. So COVID was on the horizon, but perhaps not by as much to the extent that we didn't know how bad it was going to be at that point. And the budget certainly, of course, is months in preparation. So what I'm really trying to say in a roundabout way was that when it turns out at the end of the financial year that we'd hit our budget bang on, I think that would have been one of the most remarkable occurrences in modern times. So it is to be expected that we didn't hit the budget. Given some of the pressures that we had from COVID, it's remarkable in a sense that we didn't overspend. And obviously, I'd rather hit the budget bang on, and we've had these discussions before at the quarterly updates at this executive meeting. But I'd rather have an underspend than an overspend. Of course, that's the case. And I think we would have had an overspend, and it's well worth pointing this out now, had we not had the extensive financial support that we have had from central government. It was given very swiftly and without delay, and in many cases without conditions. We had 9.6 million of unring-fenced funding to support pressures from the council, as well as much more funding for specific purposes to replace lost income. And we were able, I think, thanks to that, to allocate a large proportion of this underspend, 2.8 million, to support the budget that was delivered in March this year. Just a couple of months ago, but that does leave about 1.8 million, which will be added to the council's reserve. As part of that budget support, of course, we were able to deliver the lowest council tax rise In England, jointly, only 5 councils delivered a council tax rise of 1.99%. I was personally absolutely delighted to be able to do that at the budget meeting last March. There is a budget movement for £400,000 from finance and property to capital financing, really as a result of lower than expected interest rates. But I'm happy to take questions on that and any other items within the report right now.
Thank you, Councillor McKinnon. Members of the Executive, is there anything you would like to say at this point? Okay, I'm going to go over to Councillor Brooks.
Thank you, Leader. It's been a strange year, Councillor McKinnon, hasn't it? As you say, you and Rishi Sunak, 2 weeks after your budget, it was blown out of the water. And therefore it was a changing feast all the way through the year. I've banged on about underspends and forecasting, and I was saying around about the half year this would be 4 million or in excess of 4 million underspend, and so it has proved. 4.6 million that people actually paid that you didn't need. But I'm not sure about going over the traces of this so much as asking a slightly different question. By the half year, and notwithstanding we didn't know we were going to another lockdown in December, we knew there would be a considerable underspend. There was very little doubt in anybody's mind. Forecasting was saying it was 3.2 and rising. It seems to me, and I'm looking for some assurance that in future years, as you understand that this money is becoming available because it's not been spent for some reason, you could have started to reallocate that. I'll give you an example, and there will be many more. What could we have done for school children in terms of provision of laptops? You had the headroom on the basis of the forecast. You knew you were going to come in underspent. You could have taken $500,000 of that and said, I'm going to use it in year because I'm very confident that will not bust the budget. Now, you will have done some of that, sir, but I'm challenging you to have been able to do more and to keep that under review in this coming year, where you start off in quite a good place. You have got money from the government to help in the COVID recovery. So it's something to keep under review. That's my main point. I'm sure you and I will tussle again about accurate forecasting, but I've said that plenty of times. So I'll leave that with you as my comments on this performance. Councillor McKinnon.
Thank you, Councillor Brooks. Is there anything you want to say in response, Councillor?
Yeah, just a couple of things. Yeah, we share the desire to have accurate forecasting, and the adult social care model in particular is under review. So yeah, happy to give you that assurance. And again, you raise an interesting point about when you have an underspend, then in retrospect, you could present it as the way you have about, oh, well, you've taken money you didn't need. In retrospect, in a COVID year is very much a different thing. But again, happy to restate that we were able to deliver a very low council tax increase with the new budget. But yeah, overall, and again, I'd pay tribute to you, Councillor Brooks, about you have been very constructive at all of these quarterly meetings, and I would say that you've done the same tonight. So I thank you for that, and I thank you for your support.
Thank you both. Councillor Stewart, do you want to second this paper?
Yes, I did. And actually, Councillor Brooks and Councillor McKinnon have pretty much covered probably what I was going to say. And I'm also really appreciative, Councillor Brooks, of your approach here with this. Obviously, as a new portfolio holder coming in at this point, it's been quite a baptism of fire, I think they call it. What I have done is I've spoken to the services and said that now would be a good time. We're reviewing lots of different things. We're coming out of a strange period where lots of things happened that we just could never have predicted. And with a new portfolio holder and all of that in mind, as Councillor McKinnon has said, I've requested a full review of our adult social care model, and this includes an independent external review. I want to say it's not because I've got any particular concerns about the model. Actually, what I want here is to reassure everybody, members, residents, the services themselves, that we've got it right. We need to consider whether we build in the data that we've collated from 2020, which clearly is a year like no other. But we need to look at all of that. And so at the moment, I can't give you any timelines, but I can say that this will be reviewed. And also, I've challenged the service to reassess their budget and forecast processes because I've worked in a private sector where you would perhaps take different views. Actually, this particular adult social care underspend is 4%, and I've worked in situations where a 5% tolerance up or down is deemed to be a good result. So I appreciate that it's different here, and we're talking about spending on vital services. So I can absolutely reassure you that I will be looking at that and talking to the services about it throughout the year, and we'll see where we get in the first quarter. That's all I've really got to add, Leader, but I'm happy to second the report.
Okay, thank you, everybody. So we have a proposal. We have a second.
Point of order, Leader.
Go ahead, Councillor Bridgman.
Just to clarify, I did leave the chamber at the start of the introduction, but I've checked with the monitoring officer and I have read the report. I was here for the debate, so I do intend to vote.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Bridgman. In which case, can we move to the recommendations laid out in 2.1, 2.2, 2.3 and 2.4 of the report? And can I please see a show of executive members by raising their actual hand if they're in favour of those proposals as set out before you?
Thank you, Leader. I can confirm that's been approved.
Thank you, Sarah. Can we move on to our final item of this evening's main report? So I know we're coming to members' questions in a moment, which is the Capital Financial Performance Report outturn at item 11. Councillor McKinnon, I believe this is back to you to introduce the report, but does this find a seconder?
Yes, Leader, I'm happy to second.
Thank you, Councillor Bowick. Back to you, Councillor McKinnon.
Thanks very much, Leader. Yes, so this is the capital outturn for the year. And again, much like the revenue situation, a continuation of the story that we've seen at the quarterly updates throughout the year. I'm happy to propose the recommendations in section 2. In particular, I'm very pleased to propose the recommendation D, which you can see there, £250,000 of funding from the Community Infrastructure Levy towards the Waterside project, which we're delighted to be able to provide further support to via this mechanism. Overall, though, an £11 million underspend on the total capital programme, the vast majority of which, 9.9 million, is proposed to be reprofiled to next year. And I've said before at these quarterly updates, it's you do see some discourse where people blame COVID when perhaps that's not the reason. I mean, really, the reason for the delay for the vast majority of these projects really was the lockdown and the subsequent knock-on effect and delay that these transport projects have had. There's an incremental effect of many projects being delayed, which do add up to 9.9 million. And you can see in the appendix of the support just exactly what those precise projects are. So yes, it would have been nice to have completed those projects in the year, but of course, with the best will in the world, that's not been possible due to the outrageously unique circumstances that we've faced. I am assured, though, that we have the capacity to absorb that reprofiling and begin to catch up on the provision of the capital programme. There's so much good in that capital programme on education, on transport and the environment. In a way, it's great to be able to re-emphasise all the good things that are in the programme now. And I'm looking forward to catching up on those in the financial year to come. So I'll leave my remarks there, Leader. Happy to take questions.
Thank you, Councillor McKinnon. Members, do you have any questions for Councillor McKinnon? I see Councillor Dillon, your hand's gone up.
Yeah, thank you, Leader. I wasn't intending to speak on the report, but Councillor McKinnon mentioned the SIL payment in regards to the Waterside Centre. And actually, when we're talking about capital, we should also think about how we maintain our existing capital assets so that they're in a good enough state so that when we are working with charities, they don't have an exorbitant bill to have to bring up a key youth centre back up to a usable standard. So whilst I'm sure the Waterside Centre and its users will be grateful for that SIL money, there was a large capital receipt that the charity had to pay to West Berkshire Council, and a building in a dilapidated state, which resulted in increased money, for example, a new central heating system. So maybe if we'd looked after the building better in the first place, we might not have had to have spent that 250k of SIL. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Dillon, for your comments. Councillor Macro.
Thank you, Leader. It's comparatively small amounts of money, but I noticed that nothing was spent on the noise investigation on the field bypass, which probably was just as well, being the amount of traffic during the various lockdowns was reduced somewhat significantly. But I get a lot of complaints about noise at the bypass, and there are some homes which are very close to it and have no noise protection barriers at all. So could I ask, as soon as traffic volumes return to normal, that we carry this out as a matter of urgency, please?
Councillor McKinnon, do you want to take that, or shall I give that to Councillor Berwick? Councillor Berwick, do you want to second that?
Happy to second, yes.
I was just going to respond to Councillor Macro's
okay.
comment, please, Leader. Yes, that you'll see there from the appendix, Councillor Macro, that the 15,000 has been reprofiled in the next year. So we'll be doing our utmost to bring that forward as best we can. And
yes, I'd just like to echo Councillor McKinnon's comments about the unfortunate circumstances.
One point of order, Leader.
Thank you very much. Councillor Bridgman, shall I start again? Or? So I'm really happy that that we were able to complete some really important projects in spite of the effects of COVID, and we're all looking forward to the opening of Highwood Copse School in September. So happy to second this paper.
Okay, thank you, members. So we have a seconder. The recommendations are laid out in 2.1 under A, B, C and D. Please can I ask executive members to vote by raising their actual hand in favour of the proposal to approve the recommendations?
Thank you, Leader. I can confirm that that has been approved.
Thank you, Sarah. In which case, we now move to item 12 on our agenda, and this is members' questions. So I would like to thank all those members that have submitted their questions to this evening's executive meeting. Please note that in accordance with the new processes, you don't need to say, I asked the question standing in my name. Your question will appear on the screen and will be answered by the relevant portfolio holder. You will then be given the opportunity to ask a supplementary question. But please remember that this must be to clarify the response provided and not introduce any new business. In accordance with paragraph 5.12.9 of the Constitution, where the questioner have more than one question, only their first question will be answered. If after all other first questions have been asked and answered and there is sufficient time, we will answer subsequent questions. Please note that the time limit for members' questions is restricted to 60 minutes. And if your question has not been answered in that time, you will receive a written response within 5 clear working days of the meeting. The responses given either verbally at the meeting or in writing will be published on the Council's website. Therefore, can I ask Councillor Arderwater to answer Councillor Abb's question A on the agenda?
Green light. Here we go. Thank you. So thank you for your question, Councillor Abbs. Given the profile and reputation of the appellant's QC, he would know that the answer to the question is 0.
Do you have a supplementary?
I'm so staggered by that response. I need to reread the question. The question was very clear to ask what opportunities this council has missed. I cannot see how your answer answers that question. So my question is, can you answer the question, please? What is the missed opportunities that this executive has had to implement CS15 given that very respected QCs are arguing that we should have been doing this since 2016 on major planning applications.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Ives. So the reason for the response of 0 is that policy CS15, which is written with reference to the Code for Sustainable Homes, and that was abolished by ministerial statement on the 25th of March 2015.
Then just a point of information for you, please, Councillor. We were at a Western Area Planning meeting last night where this very same question came up, and the planning officers and legal agreed that we could be applying this. So can I ask you to talk internally and get advice?
Councillor Abbs,
it's an exceedingly important point.
Councillor Abbs,
Thank you
you're
very much for your
introducing new
patience.
information.
Thank you.
Thank you. Can we proceed then to Councillor Jeff Brooks, to Councillor Richard Sumner, question C on our agenda this evening?
Thank you, Leader, and thank you, Councillor Brooks, for your question. The Council doesn't currently operate a time recording system for all services, so it's not possible to tell you the total officer time spent on the 2 cases you've mentioned. However, I can say that Legal Services does have time recording, and there is in the region of 160 hours recorded against one of the matters referred to. The time recorded reflects the lengthy history of the matter that's been referred to.
Do you have a supplementary, Councillor Brooks?
Yes, I do. Given that we can monetize 160 hours of solicitors and support staff in trying to manage these situations, and that's just on the one example, is it not time for the council to cut its losses, which are now innumerable if we value the time of our officers, and quash these 2 cases where I don't believe SIL was ever intended to be used? The alternative is you continue to use time, which is money, to defend these cases. It is time to quash them, or you will end up ultimately very much out of pocket purely by taking a too stringent approach to these 2 cases.
Thank you, Councillor Brooks. I don't actually think that's a supplementary. I think it's your view.
No, I said, will you quash these cases? That was the question.
Okay. Councillor Sumner?
To my knowledge, one of the cases has already been paid, so we regard that as being closed anyway. The other continues. I understand what you're saying. I don't have an answer to it at the moment, and I don't believe we are in a position to do that. No, I'm happy to be guided by those that have been more involved with it for a longer period of time than I have. But no, I don't believe that it's appropriate.
Thank you both. Can we move on then to question E, which is Councillor Dillon to Councillor Sumner?
Thank you for your question, Councillor Dillon. The phase 2 transport assessment report for the local plan will form part of the evidence base at the time of the Regulation 19 consultation. This will follow on from the phase 1 report, and it will set out the progress made in designing and assessing mitigation schemes and packages of measures associated with proposed local plan development. The information provided will be an indication of possible mitigation packages and will not form the full details of all mitigation or planned schemes. This detail is more appropriate to be included in the local transport plan refresh and any planning applications submitted in the future for the local plan sites.
Do you have a supplementary, Councillor Dillon?
Yeah, thank you, Leader. Given the possibility for increased traffic flow with housing numbers of that size, how can residents give a considered opinion without having those mitigation measures to be able to comment upon?
My honest answer to that is that I will need to come back to you with any clarification.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you both. Can we move to question H, which is Councillor Macro to Councillor Cole?
Thank you, Leader. And thank you for your question, Councillor Macro. You can find all the information you require in the annual status report, which is published on the Public Protection Partnership website. This provides details of the location and monitoring results of each site, of which currently there are 36. Of these, 35 are measured on a monthly basis, and 1 is continuously monitored. All locations are reviewed on an annual basis, which takes into consideration infrastructure changes. And for your convenience, I will email to you the link to the Public Protection website so you can see these results for yourself. Do you have a supplementary?
Oh, well, thank you for offering to send me the link. Of course, makes life a bit difficult when things are split between the council website and the Public Protection website, but there we are. Could I ask you to review that list in view of the fact that there's now been a lot of scientific research that has shown how damaging air pollution can be to people, and particularly to children. And if you remember, there's one inquest has been reopened where the cause of death was put down, at least partially, to air pollution. This is a really serious issue, and I'd like us to take it a lot more seriously, please.
Thank you, Councillor Macro. As I've said, we review all the locations on an annual basis. And in response to your second question, question I, which I may get around to answering if time is sufficient, I'll give you some information about the work that we are doing on monitoring around schools.
Thank you both. Councillor Pattenden has left the meeting, so in accordance with the rules and regulations, we will provide Councillor Pattenden with a written response to his questions, which the next one was K on our item. So Councillor Pattenden will get a written response to that. Can we move on to item M then, which is Councillor Vickers to Councillor Sumner?
Thank you, Leader, and thank you, Councillor Vickers, for your question. Landowners remaining in control of the public realm on development sites is not our preferred option. Our preferred option is to find a means to manage the public open space and other assets, either through a management company, which of course involves the residents, or in partnership with a third-party organisation. In the case of Sandalford, this option might be for the council to take ownership of the land, but then to lease it to BBOW, the local wildlife trust, as we successfully do with many of our other open spaces. I would add that, contrary to some public opinion that I see about BBOW, they're not just about managing wildlife, as I'm sure you're fully aware, but they do also cover woodland and nature reserves. So this, to me, fits the bill quite nicely.
Do you have a supplementary, Councillor Vickers?
Yes, thank you. Yes, I would agree with your remark about BBOW. In a former role that I had, I found them to be one of the best volunteer management organisations in the country, and they cover public access issues as well. My supplementary is this issue, and I thank you for your answer, which is very supportive of my own view. It's a national issue, and my supplement will be, would this council consider adding its voice to the strong lobby that's building up to stop this practice whereby landowners, having made an eye-watering profit on getting their land developed, then try to get an income stream from it for perpetuity from the wretched occupants. And as the inspector at Sandalford pointed out, even those who live in affordable housing have to pay these awful charges and have no comeback through the democratic process.
Thank you. Yes, I share your concerns. I've got one local to myself where the self-same thing has happened. We were asked to take on ownership of a piece of land and on review refused to do so because it wasn't at a suitable standard. I stand by that decision made by officers, absolutely. Yes, I think it's something that we are aware of, or we would continue to be aware of, and we will continue to do whatever we can to make these situations as right as they can be for the residents, especially in those development areas.
Thank you for that answer.
Okay, thank you both. Can we move on then to question B, which is Councillor Abbs to Councillor Wollaston?
Thank you, Councillor Abbs. Can I firstly say I don't accept the first part of this question. The government has been taking sensible steps to ease lockdown restrictions. and I welcome the roadmap which is guiding us cautiously towards reclaiming our freedoms and way of life. Returning to as close to normality for public meetings as this evening is part of that process. Before the expiry of the temporary legislation that enabled local authorities to hold remote meetings via Zoom and other digital platforms, the Council hosted a meeting for parish and town clerks from across the district, which was well attended. The purpose of that meeting was to provide advice and assistance to parish and town councils regarding the legal position at that time, and to consider, therefore, how to hold council meetings both lawfully and safely. Officers from Legal and Public Protection gave presentations and answered questions. During that meeting, officers stated that parish councils could potentially make use of the West Berkshire Council facilities, which would include the use of the council chamber. Therefore, if any parish or town council would like to inquire as to the availability of the council chamber, we will be happy to hear from them.
Thank you very much. I'm again a little surprised that you took umbrage with the mistake the government made, because the government were arguing against it themselves. So thank you for that comment, but I'm not sure why. The supplementary is that therefore has any parish or town council approached us to borrow the facilities? Because this is rather nice facility, but very few can afford.
I'm afraid I can't answer the question, but I will inquire and respond to you subsequently.
Thank you very much.
Thank you both. Can we move on to item D, question D, apologies, which is Councillor Brooks to Councillor Sumner.
Thank you, Leader, and thank you, Councillor Brooks, for your question. I need to confirm, first of all, that we do not view this as a gagging clause in the service level agreement. Before Redibus announced the reductions in their service, the council had a number of exchanges with Redibus and offered 3 variations of the disputed clause, although Redibus rejected those 3 options. It's regrettable, I think, that the disputed clause would actually have let the council have sight of the letters that Redibus sent to its users before they were issued, and that's something that I was hopeful to see and wasn't able to. I think this would have reduced any potential for unnecessary stress and anxiety to the service users upon receipt of those letters from Redibus. That said, I'm not aware of a high volume of concerned contacts directly to officers here, and I'm happy to say that we've fully engaged with a local volunteer centre to very good effect.
Do you have a supplementary, Councillor Brooks?
I think you said earlier to a previous question on this, a member of the public's question, this is a rather standard clause. If it's a standard clause, why wasn't it in there before? Suddenly you've introduced it and Redibus are uncomfortable with it. And one of the reasons they're uncomfortable with it is it's not reciprocal. So it seemed to me not beyond the wit of man or woman to get this sorted out. And I urge you to do so. I'd like your assurance that you will continue to talk to Redibus, that you will look for some reciprocal arrangements on this clause, whether it's a gagging clause or not, that they believe they can live with. Because while you are frankly sitting on your high horse as a council and saying, oh, we need this clause, this is essential, there are users who are having drastic aspects to their life hurt while you are playing around with clauses that frankly should be able to be sorted out. And I urge you to sort it out very rapidly, please.
Councillor Sumner.
I'm not sure what the question was out there, but
I'm asking, will you give a reciprocal clause that they could then say at least the council has committed itself in the same way you're asking us to commit ourselves? Because otherwise, sir, you are looking like we are the big council and you are small and you will do what we tell you. That's how it's coming across.
Okay. Well, I respect your view. I don't agree with it. I don't think we're playing around was the phrase you used. I absolutely do not accept that as a statement. We have continued dialogue with Redibus, and in the last exchange of emails, there was a desire to arrange a date, which we've yet to do. But I will remind you that, and everybody else, that we have signed same contracts with other providers. And on that basis, we would also need to go through the entire process with every other provider. And I don't think that's it. I don't think that's acceptable, Councillor Brooks. We
And I don't
have to
think
have equity.
reducing the service is acceptable either, sir.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Brooks. You've made your opinions heard. Could Councillor Sumner be able to answer?
I say again that we have not been inundated with calls from concerned residents. And if you have residents' details that can be passed on to me, if they are happy for you to pass them on to me.
You have them anyway. You didn't really
Councillor Brooks, please let me finish what I'm
Councillor
saying.
Brooks, I will ask you as chair of this meeting to enable Councillor Sumner to answer, because when you jump in, nobody, including anybody listening in, can actually hear. We need one member talking at a time. He let you have your platform. Please let him respond.
Thank you. I say again, if there are residents out there that have not found alternative solutions to their transport needs, I am happy to receive their communications. I have not done so. As far as I'm aware, the head of the service has not received any. I can only make that offer to everybody. I cannot make it to individuals because the Redibus will not share the details of their customer base. I understand their reasons for doing that are GDPR based. But under these circumstances, in my view, there is an opportunity for them to do that if they choose to do so.
Thank you both. Can we move on then to item F on our agenda this evening, which is Councillor Dillon to Councillor Sumner.
Thank you, Leader. Thank you, Councillor Dillon, for your question. No, the council has not failed to perform the necessary assessments. The Housing and Employment Land Availability Assessment is the first stage in the process of sifting development proposals and contains initial responses from consultees. The council has produced detailed traffic models for both Thatcham and Newbury. These have been used in conjunction with a strategic transport model for the district to further assess the proposed development and its impacts. The mitigation packages indicated in our transport assessment work will be informed by the transport modelling. New routes will only be planned where there is a clear need and a robust business case to support them. Currently, there are no new routes proposed for the North Thatcham area.
Do you have a supplementary, Councillor Dillon?
Would you accept that new roads or significant improvements will be required if there is to be a Thatcham New Town built?
I would accept that if the planning indicates that there are and the assessments match that it will be part of the process that will be followed. But I can't sit here and say that I've identified a certain route that needs to be provided, because clearly I'm not qualified in that area.
Thank you both for your questions. Moving on, can we go to item question I, which is Councillor Macro to Councillor Cole.
Thank you for your question, Councillor Macro. Currently, we monitor for nitrogen dioxide. In the autumn, we shall also be doing a short-term monitoring programme of PM 2.5 in locations at schools as part of a project funded by DEFRA. And just in case you're wondering what PM 2.5 means, it means particulate matter of 2.5 micrograms per cubic metre. Do you have a supplementary?
Thank you. Well, I'm pleased that you are going to measure the particulate matter near schools, but could I ask you to consider monitoring for that on a wider basis? I have in front of me something from the National Atmospheric Emissions Inventory, which shows, and this is done by modelling rather than actually monitoring, which shows, for example, an area right across on the A4, right across from Field to Calcott, which is red, and which is greater than 4 parts per million. There's another side that shows the particulates outside my own house is just below the WHO recommendations, and I'm not on a main road. So could I ask that you widen that, please, and do it on a more regular basis?
Thank you. As I explained, Councillor Macro, this particular schools monitoring is funded by DEFRA for a specific area, which is schools, which you expressed particular concern about in your first question. I accept that there are other areas in the district, and certainly in my own ward at the Cheveley M4A34 interchange, there's a high incidence of PM, which you would expect. But at the moment, we are doing this specific project, and we will see what the results are, and then we will be in a stronger position to consider what future action we will take, the partnership will take once this monitoring has been completed.
Thank you both. Can we move on then to question N on our agenda this evening, which is Councillor Tony Vickers to Councillor McKinnon.
Yes, thanks, Leader. And
we're moving on another one, Linda, because Councillor Pattenden isn't in the has left the meeting. Thank you.
Thanks, Leader, and thanks, Councillor Vickers. Hi again. The Council's commissioned a statewide environmental impact assessment work, which is an iterative process. Where assessments highlight issues, those issues might then require further analysis. Initial assessment work is due to be completed in autumn, and at that point it might be appropriate to amend existing master plan layouts and development brief. In respect to the Gateway Plaza scheme, the Council is in discussion with the leasehold owners, and those discussions are ongoing, and I can't really add any more about that at this stage.
Do you have a supplementary, Councillor?
Yes, I have. Would you not agree, Councillor McKinnon, that the Gateway Plaza, which now has full planning permission with all conditions discharged as far as the planners are concerned, would, if it was allowed to get on and redevelop, act as a boost, as a catalyst to the economic value and the interest in the wider development industry in the rest of the site? So should we not be moving forward faster on that aspect as a landowner?
My concern as portfolio holder with responsibility for the regeneration of the site is for the site as a whole, rather than commenting on individual parcels of land. So I wouldn't propose to agree or disagree with that assessment.
Thank you both. Can we move on then to question G on our agenda, which is Councillor Dillon to Councillor Sumner.
Thank you, Leader, and thank you again, Councillor Dillon, for your question. Following the recent flash flooding on the A4 London Road at Newbury, a site investigation was undertaken by officers and remedial work to the system identified. The system currently outfalls to a ditch or swale, which is on private land, and this will require excavation and reprofiling. The Drainage and Flood Risk team will write to the landowners requesting the work is undertaken under the Land Drainage Act. And in addition, a works order has been placed with the council's term contractor to carry out cleansing work of the roadside gullies and carrier drains. Additional roadside gullies and outfall pipes were installed when the cycleway improvements were undertaken in 2018.
Would you like a supplementary?
Yeah, it appeared that particular flash flood, and I'd be interested in engineers' views, is the cycle lane should have left the situation in either the same or a better position in terms of flood defences. But actually having that hard curbstone there seems to keep all of the water on the highway itself. And obviously where that's now a narrower channel, you've got all the cars having to drive through the flood water rather than being able to go through the centre of the road. So being such a key route through the town, you know, I'm just keen to see it resolved as soon as possible. Thank you.
Yeah, understand that. Happy to look into the reports that have been raised so far, and if there's information in there that we can share with you, I'm happy to do so.
Okay, thank you both. Now question J on our agenda, which is Councillor Macro to Councillor Sumner.
If anybody else wants a chance at any point this evening, just feel free to jump in. Thank you, Leader, and thank you, Councillor Macro, for your question. The council has a strategic transport model covering the whole district. This is considered to provide an appropriate level of assessment for THEOL for the purposes of the local plan. The detail of the model varies from area to area according to the number of zones that have been included, and the level of detail increases around THEOL due to the breaking down of the area into a number of zones. If outputs from the strategic model indicate further work is needed, there are a number of options for further assessment. These range from making use of other models used to support planning applications through to a specific junction modelling tool. The local transport plan process can be used to consider THIL's networks as well, and in particular measures and packages to be used to increase the level of more sustainable travel to and from the area.
Do you have a supplementary, Councillor Macro?
Thank you. I'm not quite sure about that answer. It sounded like no, but yes. But yes, the strategic model which was shown to the Planning Advisory Group and the Transport Advisory Group did not show problems on the road network around THIL and Junction 12 of the M4 that other more detailed models, like the one carried out for IKEA, did, and which residents saw on a daily basis until the COVID pandemic reduced the amount of traffic. So could you please look at that again and really look at some detailed traffic modelling, please, before these sites are allocated and put even more strain on our local roads?
I'm happy to pick up with officers again and again, you know, where there's information that we can share that informs, happy to share.
Thank you.
Thank you both. We're now going to move to P on our agenda. The last three questions are all yours, Councillor Abb. So first of all, it's over to Councillor Arderwater to answer on question P.
Thank you, Leader, and thank you for your question, Councillor Abbs. Until the Local Plan Regulation 19 consultation document is produced, it's not really reasonable to say that new settlements proposed will not be carbon neutral or net zero carbon. The intention of the draft policy was for all developments to be regulated as carbon neutral in line with our declared climate emergency policy. And as a further bit of background, what we see is that the Future Homes Standard, which the government is currently consulting on at a high level, is intended to be consulted on in technical detail in 2023, with legislation introduced in 2024. So while it is rather more deliberate than certainly I would have hoped, we do have a trajectory, and I'm confident of top-level guidance from the government ensuring that future developments will be carbon neutral in this district.
Yeah, thank you very much for that answer. To keep it short, if we already have the tools available to us, and that was revealed that we do last night's Western Area Planning meeting, why are we not pushing further for this net zero? Why are we waiting for government to move forward when we seem to have the ammunition in our own armoury?
I will have to get back to you with a detailed response, Councillor Abbs, but in general, again, it is absolutely not the case that we are sitting on our hands waiting for government to produce that higher standard. And again, as you're aware, we do now have the tools to be able to mandate higher standards, and I'm confident we will do that.
I think personally we're on the same page here. Actually, we want net zero homes, so that's fine.
Well, I'm glad you're agreeing. So can we move to question Q, which is between the two of you again?
Thank you, and once again, thank you for your question, Councillor Abbs. With regards to Sandford and its ancient woodlands, officers will be opening up early discussions with the developer to make it explicitly clear what protection measures are required, and to follow this up with regular monitoring of the site. Do you have a supplementary?
Yeah, thank you very much. Well, that surprises me a little bit, the answer, because this question is formed in a way that there is existing growing evidence of damage and potential damage to the existing ancient trees. And we're not waiting for Sandalford to come along. We can look at Warren Road. So the supplementary is, would you agree that we have a lack of enforcement here to monitor actually the various things that are going on around the district? And this leads to the danger of our ancient woodland being destroyed before we even get to actually build anything new.
I'd have to disagree with you on that point, Councillor Abbs. We have had an officer looking on site at the trees in Warren Road, and are investigating currently to see who carried this work out. Currently, the assessment is that trenching is close to the trees, but no significant damage has been caused to date.
The question was, do we have enough?
Right.
Not as we done something.
I am confident that we do, but we'll ask officers to make sure that is the case.
Thank you very much.
And the final question of this evening is question R on our agenda, which is Councillor Abbs to Councillor McKinnon.
Yeah, thanks, Linda. Hi, Councillor Abbs. The council's provided a wide range of responses to support local companies across the district. These include business rates relief, central government business grants, and the locally tailored additional restrictions grant scheme using government funding. Local taxi companies have been supported and continue to be supported through those additional restriction grants, in particular Type D of those ARGs. The council to date has paid out over £24,000 to taxi companies and is in the process of reviewing a further 23 applications for the additional restrictions grant from local taxi companies. And in respect to those applications, we're awaiting evidence from applicants. Do you have a supplementary?
Yeah, thank you very much, Councillor McKinnon. You didn't see, didn't hear a number of how many that 24k covered. And I'm just wondering whether or not you've compared what we're giving in support of taxis to maybe neighbouring councils.
I'm not one to speak for neighbouring councils. Obviously, we're concerned with West Berkshire. What we've done for taxi firms alongside other local businesses is if they can demonstrate financial vulnerability and a significant drop in income due to COVID, then we will award an ARG. That is a good policy. And I certainly wouldn't be suggesting that we give out a grant to every taxi firm in the district, regardless of size or turnover, or whether or not they're financially vulnerable. I think we've reached a good balance here by supporting businesses that are showing signs of vulnerability with targeted grants without distributing public money to those who don't need it. I think to suggest otherwise, which would, I'm not saying you are, but that would be a bit too much of a cavalier approach to public money, which I wouldn't want to go down.
Yes, but thank you, Councillor. You haven't given me a number still. But how many was this 24k spread across? You said you're waiting more applications, but
I don't have the number of businesses to hand. I said we're waiting on 23 applications, or we're processing 23 applications, and the money paid to date is 24,000.
Well, you will send that information to me, please.
I'll be happy to drop an email.
Thanks very much.
Members, thank you. That brings us to the end of members' questions, and it actually brings us to the end of our meeting. So first of all, thank you all for bearing with us as we've tried this yet another new way of working. Can I remind you all to remain in your seat and to wait until the clerk has informed us that they have stopped recording before you get up. But thank you all for, that concludes the business for today, and thank everyone for your attendance. Thank you those that have Zoomed in. It's good to see you, and thank you those that have actually come into the chamber as well. Councillor Dillon, hand.
Yeah, thank you, Leader. It was just a comment on your the backgrounds that some of the executive are displaying for Carers Week. I see that not all of your exec are, but I didn't see an email coming out offering that to all members. So sorry if I missed it and not displayed it, but if we were given that, we would have put it up as well. And I think that would have sent a nice message, all of councillors and officers displaying the same background.
Councillor Dillon, the background I've got before me was sent to all Health and Wellbeing Board members. So your Health and Wellbeing Board representative should have had that, I believe. And therefore, what our Health and Wellbeing Board members did was circulated, but apologies, because we all want to support our Carers Week, and we will try to make note of that for next time where we've got a particular background. But certainly you'll have seen we did this for Mental Health Week. We've done it for Carers Week. It's something we're really keen to do to just raise awareness across the district, and that goes to all of us. So apologies.
We're happy to support that.
Yeah, well, apologies that you haven't received it this time round. I think we probably just need a bit of coordination probably going on between our groups. Thank you, everybody. We will wait till we're informed that we have stopped recording.